Dear friends, I would like to welcome you all to an evening of amazing knowledge. And you all know Dr. Nader Saiedi. I don't dare to say anything over and above that. We will start with two prayers. Mr. Liu from Malaysia, he usually opens our evenings on Thursday nights, and after that, Pina will say the second prayers. Please mute yourselves. Go ahead, Mr. Liu.
Putra wujud sebenarnya di bumi supaya di surgaku aku dapat ingat dikau supaya di surgaku aku dapat ingat dikau. Demikianlah mata diriku dan dirimu akan dihiburkan. Demikianlah mata diriku dan dirimu akan dihiburkan.
Oh my God, O thou forgiver of sins, bestower of gifts, dispeller of afflictions, verily I beseech thee to forgive the sins of such as have abandoned the physical garment and have ascended to the spiritual world and have ascended to the spiritual world. O my Lord, purify them from trespasses, dispel their sorrows, and change the darkness into light. O my Lord, purify them from trespasses, dispel their sorrows, and change the darkness into light. Cause them to enter the garden of happiness. Cleanse them with the most pure water, and grant them to behold thy splendors on the loftiest mount. Cause them to enter the garden of happiness. Cleanse them with the most pure water, and grant them to behold thy splendors on the loftiest mount. Abdul Baha, Abdul Baha.
فروز خانم شما میوت هستین.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. It's our great pleasure, dear friends, to welcome tonight's distinguished speaker, Dr. Nader Saiedi, a renowned sociologist and esteemed scholar who taught at UCLA and Carleton College. His impressive body of work includes Gate of the Heaven, Understanding the Bab's Symbolism and Spirituality, Logos and Civilization, Spirit, History, and Order in the Thought of Bahá'u'lláh, The Birth of Social Theory, Social Thought in the Ancient and Medieval Worlds. Tonight, first of all, Dr. Saiedi, I cannot find words to thank you for accepting to be here. Thank you very much. Dr. Saiedi's topic tonight is the Bab, his character and worldview.
Let me first thank the friends in Oakville, am I correct? But particularly my very, very, very dear friend Foruzande. Those who know her, they know that she is just perfect embodiment of joy, of energy and love. Her smiles really refreshes the heart of anybody who comes in contact with her, and I'm very honored that I'm invited to this meeting. My topic, as it was mentioned, is the Bab, his character and his worldview. And I was told that it is useful to emphasize the character, that the personality of the Bab even more. In the limited time that is available to us, I'm going to discuss a combination of both in terms of what I was privileged to have, namely reading the writings of the Bab. So when I talk about the character of the Bab, anything that I mention is based upon and is the result of whatever that I have seen present in his own writings. So from his writings and from his own words, I am drawing these traits together, referring to the character of the Bab. But an adequate discussion of this requires 24 hours, which we don't have. So I start and we'll see what happens. Very briefly, I'm going to talk about a little bit the Bab as a son in relation to his father, to his mother, to his grandmother, and at the same time talk about the Bab as a husband, as a lover, and also his loving relation to the Ethiopian servant, which was present in his household. So this would be the beginning, but I'll also address his relation to women in particular as well, and reflected in his teachings with regard to the status of women, and probably briefly referring to his writings about Tahirih, an exceptional figure in the world. And in addition to that, I'm going to briefly talk about his general love for reality, for being, his love for God, but also his love for nature, for all beings, and for human beings, and his teachings and his positions in that regard. If we had time, I would also briefly deal with his sense of aesthetics. Beauty was extremely important for the Bab, and in a sense, he has this artistic element which manifests itself in varieties of ways in his character, and of course his courage, which ultimately leads to his refusal to recant his station, and therefore being condemned to death in a very mysterious and heroic form of martyrdom that he experienced. So there are a lot of things that I'm thinking that I may discuss, but I haven't written them. So, and usually in thought, ideas come together, follow each other so fast. But when you want to express them, of course, it takes a lot of time, and that's my problem always. Let me start with, I'll try to be very brief so that I can deal with a number of issues. We are all familiar with the Ethiopian servant in the household of the Bab. His name was Mubarak, which means blessed one. And one of the interesting things is that we have so many letters of the Bab. The Bab, when he was in different places, including during his imprisonment in Maku, in Chehriq, he wrote frequently to his wife, to his mother, and in these letters we see frequent references to the Ethiopian servant Mubarak, and to frequent references to his grandmother. In the books of history about the Bab, grandmother is not even mentioned, but in his letters, always Jaddeh Mubarakeh, Jaddeh Muazzameh, the esteemed grandmother is mentioned in so many of letters with so much affection and so on. In one of the writings of the Bab, and many of these writings that I'm talking about have not been published either in its original, nor they have been translated. In one of his writings, the Bab talks about the fact that according to the holy books, of course, in the day of the promised one, there would be, the world would go through a revolution. So those who are high become low, those who are low become high. This is something, it has biblical sources, but also in Islam becomes a very important element for the revelation of the promised one. The Bab talks about this issue frequently in his writings. In the Persian Bayan, this is famous, that he talks about the most learned, most famous scholar of the world of Shia Islam, the one that all Shia Muslims were following him. And he was a great scholar and had so many books. And the Bab says that he was the highest, but because all those knowledge became an obstacle for understanding the truth and therefore recognition of the new revelation, therefore he became the lowest. And he says that Gandum Pak Kon, one of his followers that he was illiterate. He couldn't read or write. So apparently he had absolutely no knowledge, no scholarship. And he says that because he understood the truth and devoted himself to the truth, he became the highest. In one of his writings, he says the same thing, but the characters become different. He says that the king Muhammad Shah, who was the king of Iran, who was, of course, in the highest station of power and authority, because he failed to recognize the manifestation of God, therefore he became the lowest. And he says Mubarak, namely the Ethiopian servant, although apparently he's just a low servant, has no social station or status and so on, because he did good in the realm of the faith. Bema ahsana fi din. He says that for that reason he became the highest. So you can see that the perception of the Bab of Mubarak, not only his personal love for him, but also such a recognition that the truth of Mubarak, this Ethiopian servant, makes him of the highest station of authority. One of the writings of the Bab that people don't know even if such a work exists or not, is a set of 30 prayers that he wrote on the occasion of he himself becoming 30 years old. And so for each year of his life, he reveals one prayer. Prayers in the writings of the Bab are not small works. An entire book can be a prayer. An entire chapter can be a prayer. I wish I had time to explain this, but we don't. In any case, so in each one of these prayers is devoted to 1 year of his life. And when he's talking about the time that he was 7 years of age, he asked for the blessings of God for his father, for his mother, and for the Ethiopian servant, Mubarak. And then he adds, and for the arrows and bows that he made for me so that I would play. You can see that this, when you read these things, I mean, you have a sense of the character of the Bab. His relation to his wife is unique. It is partly also expression of his worldview with regard to women and the dignity of all human beings, and therefore dignity of all categories of humanity. But with regard to his wife Khadijah, he had particular love. I thought that I would share with you a letter that he has written from the port city of Bushehr, addressing his wife. I translated that letter and I read it for you. We know exactly when the letter is written because he says that it is 2 days that he has arrived in Bushehr, and he says that the boat is becoming ready for going to Mecca and Medina. So this is the late 1844, and this is when he goes to go to Mecca and Medina, and of course he comes back from that trip. So he sees his wife again, but of course after the next exile, this was voluntary, this was not exile, but the next departure to Isfahan, which was really an exile, there was no return, and he never saw his wife back. He starts addresses his wife Jane Shirine man, which means my sweetheart or my sweet life, Jane Shirine man. And he begins his short letter with a poem in Arabic. And the poem, I have translated, this is what the poem says at the beginning. Think not that the delay in letters is due to lack of interest, or that the heart is preoccupied with others. Nay, rather, whenever my hand begins to write a single word, my tears precede it and wash it away. You can see the character of the Bab, his romantic character, his love for his wife. And the letter is this. He continues, God knows that from the time I left you, the pain of separation is beyond description. However, it is the divine will that, accordance to wisdom, has decreed such a course. By the grace of God and his favored ones, the path of return shall in best possible way be prepared. And he was right, he could return, but that was the last time. It is now 2 days that I have been in Bushehr, and it is very hot. God shall protect. The boat is supposed to leave Bushehr in this month for Mecca and Medina. May God keep us all safe. At the time of my departure, there was no opportunity to visit the esteemed mother. Please convey my greetings and ask for her prayer. Regarding the cloth fabric, I will write to Bombay. The will of God shall be done. Peace and God's bounty and blessings be upon you. It's one of the very interesting points that I could see in varieties of letters of the Bab, that when he's in Maku and Chehriq imprisoned, and it was in a very extremely difficult positions. And also he was so busy, he was constantly revealing works. People don't know that if you put the writings of the Bab together, it becomes like 100 books. And this is written in 6 years only. So day and night, really, there was revelation. In addition, he is the leader of a new spiritual community, which was highly persecuted throughout Iran, and he had to lead this. So, all these situations and very difficult personal position that he was in these mountains and so on. But in the letters, we see that he's constantly managing events for his family. In one of the letters, he says that the esteemed grandmother has asked for saffron. And he says that he is writing to his youngest uncle who lives in Yazd to prepare and send the best saffron. These types of activities, he never says I'm so busy or I'm so oppressed, and he's just perfect son. He's ideal son, and he spends time and love. Really, it's very touching when you actually read these letters and so on. Anyway, I'm not, as I mentioned, I'm not talking on the basis of the books of history who have written different things about the life of the Bab and so on. Everything I say is based upon his own words. Two of his writings was very interesting for me. it is, I think it was close to his martyrdom, and he knew that this is the end of his life. So he wrote two works, and they are written in the language of divine verses, namely God is speaking. One is addressing his mother, and one is addressing his father. And in both of them, of course, he is affirming the Bab's love and God's pleasure and satisfaction with both of them, with the mother and with the father. Of course, the father has passed away in the childhood of the Bab. Something interesting about that is that in that letter, the Bab says, addressing his father, that he passed away when the Bab was in the year of his life, Ahad. One of the things about the Bab is that he always plays with the fact that in Arabic, following Hebrew, alphabetical letters have a particular value, have a particular number. So for instance, A is 1, B is 2, and it goes on. J is 3, and so on. It goes from 1 to 1,000. And so a lot of things that he says are based upon conversion of this, and it creates a lot of new possibilities of symbolism and so on. Anyway, the word ahad together becomes 13. Ahad is A, which is one sort of H, which is 8, and D, which is 4. And that made me very surprised, because in all the books of history, they talk about the father of the Bab passing away when he was about 7, 8 years of age. But then I noted, and I was really shocked by this discrepancy. But then I noted that in the writings of the Bab, like almost all the writings of the Bab, when he was in prison in Maku and Cherir, because he constantly was revealing, his secretary would write them in shorthand, and usually without any dots which define the words. In Arabic, for instance, one horizontal line can become B if a dot is below that. It can become T if there are 2 dots above it, or become TH or H or S if there is 3 dots above it, and so on. And because he was constantly revealing, and it was written in shorthand, so dots were excluded. And so the way that the person who has been transcribing this has written it ahad, which becomes 13. But in reality, it was ajat, namely that H, it had a dot, but the dot was not written, but then it was forgotten that there is. So ajat becomes 8. A is 1, J is 3, and D is 7. By the way, in the writings of the Bab, when he says, for instance, the year 8 years of age or whatever, sometimes he calculates it from the time of birth. But many times he calculates the age from the time of conception. Many times. So for instance, here that he's saying that when he was 8 years of age that his father passed, it can be actually 7 years if he's counting that from the time of conception. Anyway, there are so many little but beautiful things. For instance, in his letter to his mother, he's mentioning the sister and brother that the Bab had who died in their infancy. We never knew that. I mean, no book of history I have read anything about that. But in these letters, they are mentioned. In general, I want now to say something about both the character of the Bab and his worldview. They are inseparable from each other. Let me say briefly a philosophical, theological point, namely that in my judgment, some forms of religious philosophy and some form of anti-religious philosophy, they usually have a common perspective. By anti-religious philosophy, I mean materialistic philosophies which look at the world, at reality, at nature, and so on as purely a material entity. And so, for example, Marxist theory is like that. The whole reality is material, the nature is material, physical, humans are material, and so on. And that becomes the basis of rejection of any spiritual point of view. But in most of the religious worldviews and the philosophical ideas among many theologians, we have almost a similar idea, namely the world of nature, reality, becomes opposed to God. God is the realm of spirit, the realm of the divine, is beautiful, is good, is spiritual, but the realm of the world, this world, is a material world opposed to the realm of spirit. And therefore, in many situations, devotion to God is understood as requiring, negating, rejecting this world. Negating, rejecting nature and the relation to nature. In the writings of the Bab, what we see is a totally different point of view. And in this point of view, really there is no distinction between the spiritual and material. All reality is spiritual, and the truth of everything is ultimately spiritual. And for that reason, love of God and love of the world, they become one and the same. Love of the material world in Baha'i writings as well sometimes is defined as something against the spiritual reality, spiritual truth. But that means that your relation to nature is based upon reducing nature as a means of selfish consumption, selfish pleasure. Such a thing is not accepted by the Bab or by Baha'u'lláh. But the exact opposite of that, namely affirming nature, the entire nature, all reality as beautiful, as sacred. And therefore, loving God and loving the expression of God, the reflection of God, namely the world, loving that and not reducing that to an instrument of selfish personal desires, that becomes absolutely spiritual. And it becomes a precondition of a true spirituality. In the writings of the Bab, we see so many things which is indicating this general love that the Bab has for all reality. I'll give you a few examples for this. The first one is the fact that in all his writings, material phenomena become symbols of spiritual phenomena, and they become participating in each other and inseparable from each other. For instance, the four elements, fire, water, air, dust. So many times the Bab talks about them, but in all these cases, they become symbols, not arbitrary signs, to have no relation with the meaning, but they become symbols participating in the spiritual truth. All the spiritual truths are usually in his writings, they become presented usually in four categories, and these four categories become parallel, mutually reflecting each other, and one of these four are the four elements. For example, water. Water, I remember that in his commentary on the Surah of Kawthar. Surah of Kawthar is a short chapter in Quran. And Yahya Darabi, when he came to visit the Bab, asked for a commentary, writing a commentary on that. And I remember when I was reading that work of the Bab, in one place the Bab, in early parts of that, the Bab tells this Yahya, so it is part of commentary on the Surah of Kawthar. The Bab says that if he wishes, he can unveil the truth of all four rivers of paradise by this very cup of tea that he's right now offering it to Yahya. Well, it is also, I mean, that gives a clue that this is in the house of the Bab. He is present, and the Bab is also, in addition to revealing this commentary, is also offering as a perfect host tea to him. And when I read that, I was wondering how is it possible. Close to the end of that, and also in one other works of the Bab, you see a glimpse of that. Namely, the Bab says that because according to Quran, which is influenced by the Bible, that the paradise in the heaven, there are four rivers: river of pure water, pure milk, pure honey, and wine. This is very important in the Islamic world, and in terms of concept of heaven and resurrection and so on, which was a great mystery. In any case, the Bab explains that this cup of tea, if it is consumed in a spirit of love and with refinement, with letafat, then it is an experience of the four rivers of paradise. You are already in paradise, in heaven, and you are having it. You see, tea, he explains, for tea, you have to have water. There's no tea without water, which is one river of paradise. And it is clear that the way the Bab had tea, he would use milk. So there is milk as well. And he would use sugar or honey as well. And the tea leaves, because it creates the relaxation, it becomes like the wine. These are all his own explanations. And so what he's saying is that every little ordinary event of life, like having a cup of tea, if it is in the right spirit, it is the absolute highest spiritual experience of heaven. The distinction, not only distinction, but contradiction between the spiritual, between the realm of the divine and the material, physical realm, is all gone. When he, in his writings, talks about labor, he talks about labor frequently. And one of his teachings is that whatever anybody does in industry, in work, it should be in the utmost state of perfection, which is possible for that person. The word is etqan, which means perfection. And he frequently says that this is the way God acts. The work of God, the creation of God is always in uttermost perfection. And he says that therefore, if we human beings in our industry, in our labor, we do the utmost best that is possible for us, that means that we are following the example of God. And it means that it is as if God is working through us. Our work becomes the work of God as reflection of God, and it becomes a spiritual. You can see that even dealing with the realm of labor. I emphasize that because in Marxist theory, which is one of my specialties, Marxist theory, labor is the essence of materiality. I mean, the ultimate material is labor. Whereas for the Bab, labor is a spiritual phenomenon, like everything else, and it has to become spiritualized. And of course, it's only humans who have labor. Labor becomes externalization, realization of ideas of a spirit. It is the realm of a spirit, which now through labor transforms the reality and so on. And so nature becomes expression of a spirit, of idea. But in addition to that, the Bab is asking for a new culture in relation to work and industry, in relation to the realm of economy. Namely, it has to be spiritualized for the sake of service. It's more than saying that work is worship. That is a great spiritual thesis. But the Bab goes even further. I'll give you one other example. One of the teachings of the Bab is transformation of language. And he says that, in the ideal future, the names of everything become one of the names of God. But he says that for now, since that is not possible, for now, when you have a name of any person, any object, anything, he says that you have to divide that name into the alphabetical letters which constitute that. So when I say water, you have to think of W-A-T-E-R. And then he says that then you should take each letter as an abbreviation of one of the names and attributes of God. And he himself gives one example. This is in Persian Bayan. He gives the example of a piece of stone, rock, pebble, sand, because that is the most worthless thing that you can imagine. And it consists of something like S, N, and G, but there is no G in Arabic, so it becomes K. And so he says that in a piece of stone, you have to see in its S, Sobuh, in its N, Nur, which means light, and in its K, Karim, all bountiful. So, so sanctified, light, bountiful becomes descriptions of a piece of stone. And why he's saying that you should do, and he says that you should do this with everything and everyone, with all the names, and he says in all languages. And he explains that why this is so, because the truth of everything is it's a spiritual reality, which is reflection of God. And the point is that this truth become actualized, become realized in the world. And he believes that the time has come that in a new spiritual culture, it would be a moral imperative that with regard to everything, people bring the perfection, actualization of that thing. And he defines heaven and hell in these ways. So heaven and hell is no longer just for human beings. It's for everything. And for everything, heaven is the state of realization of its potentialities. Hell, for everything, is the state of deprivation from realizing its potentialities. And he says that human beings have this moral responsibility in relation to everything to do that. So why then, in the name of anything, any object or person, we have to do that? Namely, he wants us, when we are looking at anything, including the whole world of nature, to see the truth of nature, to see the truth of human beings. And that truth, of course, is reflection of divine names and attributes. So anything like a piece of stone, if I'm doing that in English, stone, S becomes, for instance, sanctified. T becomes transcendental. O becomes omnipotent. N becomes near, because that's one of the names of God. It's the nearest thing to us, as Quran would say. And E is exalted. So the point of the Bab is to have a new form of consciousness, to have a new form of culture. And in this culture, everything and everyone are perceived and seen as reflections of God, therefore as beautiful, as sacred, as having rights. This general, all-encompassing love of the Bab for all beings manifests itself in so many ways. Let me read one of the statements of the Bab when he's talking about the things that I just mentioned. He says the substance of, this is in Persian Bayan, the substance of this case is this, that inasmuch as a day is destined for each thing to attain unto its utmost perfection, when all its potentialities shall be manifestly actualized, and it is only then that it is worthy to be called by a name of God, and inasmuch as God has commanded people of the Bayan to elevate all things to their uttermost limit of perfection, therefore he has granted them permission to call everything through the letters of their names, in the way that I mentioned, by the names of God, lauded and magnified be he, that none may see in anything aught but the countenance of the revelation of the will, in whom not is seen but God. I remember tablets that he wrote when he was supposed to go to Chehri, when he was supposed to leave the mountain of Maku and go to another exile, that he writes this tablet addressing the mountain. It's very similar in a sense of a spirit to the tablet of Carmel, that Baha'u'lláh is addressing the Mount Carmel. The way the Bab is talking to this mountain is not a dead thing, it's not an it. It is using the words of the creative Jewish philosopher Martin. Anyway, the relation is the relation with the thou, I thou, not I it, and he shows in this his affection for the mountain, that he would miss the mountain. And of course, he talks about the joy of this mountain because the Bab is there. It's a love letter between the Bab and the mountain. And this is a typical phenomenon in his writings. Let me say something. This is a little bit complex, but very important for understanding what I was discussing. As I mentioned many times, either through some inadequate theological understanding or through atheistic, materialistic understanding of the world, the reality, the things of the world are reduced to physical characteristics as opposed to the spirit, as opposed to God. The Bab has a totally different worldview. And this is something that is repeated hundreds of times in his writings in different ways. For the Bab, everything, that means manifestation of God, that means all nature, that means all human beings without exception. Everything has two aspects. It is the combination and unity of two different aspects. One of them he calls divinity, uluhiyat, and the other one he calls servitude, namely ubudiyat. And his expression is a mirror. Everything is mirror of God. But you have to pay attention to the complexity of this concept. He says the mirror consists of two aspects, of two parts. One is the glass of the mirror. There is no mirror without a particular glass. And this glass has its own characteristics. So my glass is different than your glass. Some glasses are red, some glasses are yellow, some glasses are circular, some are, anyway, triangular, some are small, some. So this is the characteristics which separates us from each other. And he calls this the aspect of servitude as a created being. But then a mirror is a mirror because in addition to being a particular glass, it has the reflection of the sun, the reflection of God on it. So there is the image of the sun plus a particular glass. The image of the sun reflected in this mirror, that is the divinity of the mirror. We are not God, but we are reflections of God. And our ultimate truth is this reflection of God. And that is existing in everything and everyone. And that's our truth. And the purpose of the Bab was to create a new culture in which we become aware of the truth of things. Prophet Muhammad had a prayer in which he says, Allahumma arini haqa'iq al-ashya. Oh God, show me the truth of things. And the Bab says, I have come to fulfill the wish of Prophet Muhammad. And he shows the truth of all things, which is this reflection of God. And so everything becomes beautiful, everything becomes sacred, everything has rights. The same idea he expresses in terms of the two aspects being essence and existence. So essence becomes the aspect of servitude, the created aspect of anything, which separates us from each other. My essence, namely, I am close now, very soon 70 years of age. I am born in Tehran. I live in right now in Bloomington, these are what defines me and separates me from other things. These are the characteristics of the glass. This is essence, mahiyat. But my truth is not this. My truth is my existence. The existence becomes reflection of God, is the image of God. My existence and your existence, these are all expressions which are our truth, are expressions of our divine spiritual reality. The reason that he wrote as his manifesto for declaration, expressing his claim on the first day of declaration by writing a commentary on the Surah of Joseph. The main reason he himself has explained it, because the word Joseph, Yusuf, is equal to the word qayyum, which means self-subsisting, the one who exists, but exists of its own. Namely, its existence is not due to anything else. Qayyum. The word qayyum, which by the way has the same meaning that the word existence has in Latin. Ex means out of, forth. And sister in its original Latin means standing out. Qayyum is from qiyam. Abdullah in some answered questions talk about existence as two types, two possibility. Qiyam is zuhuri, qiyam is suduri, and whatever. Anyway, it's very the Bab makes Qayyum and Joseph one and the same, because both of them numerically are equal to 156 or 152, I don't remember. I can calculate right now, but it takes time. I mentioned that every letter is equal to a particular number. So the word Joseph, suddenly it had no relation to the word self-subsisting, right? But because of this method of the Bab, suddenly Joseph and the name of God self-subsisting become one and the same. And that becomes the basis of his interpretation of the story of Joseph, in which Joseph becomes expression of the revelation of God. Let me finish, because we are the Bab with few little things. I have written a few points, but they require 24 hours discussion. To give you one example, I'll finish by giving a few things, saying a few things about the status of women from the point of view of the Bab. To begin with, of course, I have here Arabic Bayan, and it's one of the main writings of the Bab. In the chapter 10, and he calls all his chapters unity, wahid, which the word wahid in Arabic means one, is number one. But at the same time, because it is wahid, V-A-H-E-D, something like that, in Arabic, if you calculate the value of the letters which constitute the word wahid, they become equal to 19. And so for that reason, for the Bab, 19 and 1 are one and the same. And he always uses that, which is the symbolism for one of the most important ideas in the worldview of the Bab. Namely, the letters of the living, who are 18, together with the Bab become 19. But the truth of these 19 is one and the same. And that is the reflection of the truth of the Bab. And these 19 become the basis of what he calls all things, kull shay, namely all things. All things become 361, which is 19 times 19. namely out of one, the divine revelation, 19 comes into existence, whose truth is this one. And out of 19, a culture, a community, all things is created, which means that the truth of everything is one and the same. That is the divine reflection. In all things and all people and everything, you have to see its truth. And that truth becomes divine revelation. That is the reason for these symbolisms and so on. Anyway, so the chapter he calls Wahid. And usually he wants his writings to consist of 19 chapters. So each one of them becomes Wahid, which is one, but at the same time 19. This is the 10th chapter. And he begins by first saying, don't avoid dogs and animals like that, because for Muslims, they are perceived to be essentially unclean and polluting, and therefore you have to avoid them. The Bab destroyed this whole idea of essential pollution for people, for objects, and so on. So he says, don't avoid dogs and animals like that, even if the wet hair of the dog would touch you. He says, though, if you want, for the sake of cleanliness, you can do that. But in principle, the idea of polluting an unclean character of the dog and other animals is rejected. Immediately after that, his second point is that among the Baha'is, men and women, which he calls them huruf and hurufat, letters, both means letters, like letters of the living. All men and all women are also letters. All beings are symbols, expressions of the word of God, of the praise of God. All beings are a prayer, so everything is dialogue, everything is an expression. Anyway, he says that if the men wish to look at women, or women wish to look at men, this is permitted. Namely, he's abrogating the whole idea of veil in a way that women can never be seen by a man, unless it is the father, brother, and husband. And he says that God permits that, however, without existence of anything in their gaze which God does not like, namely it should not be an immoral gaze. And he continues that God has willed to create between men and women what causes all of you so that with love to exist in this new paradise. Shortly after this, of course, Badasht takes place, and Tahireh does that heroic event. Sometimes people think that Tahireh did that all on her own, but this was also realization of the command of the Bab. In order to see the position of the Bab with regard to women, I finished this very incoherent discussion with something that probably none of you have heard, unless I have said that. One of the writings of the Bab that I had the honor of reading that, which nobody knows that it exists really, is a work that he writes as a commentary, the second part of the commentary on the beginning letters of the Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. That's that original phrase of Quran consists of 19 letters, and the Bab takes these as symbols of 19 in the same ways that I have mentioned, and of course becomes the Bab and 18 letters of the living. But in this work, which is written in Chehri, something wonderful happens, and that's that the Bab gives the names of the letters of the living. For the Baha'is, this might not seem a big deal because we have the names of the letters of the living in Dawnbreakers. But Dawnbreakers is a book written by a particular human being. The Azalis, they don't believe in that, and they have for themselves names of the letters of the living very different from what the Baha'is believe. But now we have the words of the Bab himself, who is giving the names of the letters of the living, which conform to what is in Dawnbreakers. But the way he says that they are 17 and 1. And he writes it in this way, and he says that, and the name of 17 of them is this. And then he gives the name of these 17. And I remember when I first saw this, I didn't read all the names in detail. I was so excited. Why he says 17 and 1, and what happens to that other one? Why he is separating? So I, without reading all the details of these names, I went to the next part, and then he says that we took the essence of this 17 and placed it in this one soul who recognized us and becomes number 18. I was getting insane. Who is this? And immediately I said, probably it is Qudus. But then I went back now to the names. The name of Qudus is among the 17. I said, maybe it is Mullah Hussein, the first one. I went back. It is, Mullah Hussein name is there. Everybody is there except Tahiri. It is Tahiri, and then on the top of that is written something which explains that this refers to Tahiri. The Bab, this is the way the Bab saw Tahiri, that he sees 18 letters of the living as 17 plus Tahiri. And Tahiri is defined as the reality who has within herself the essence of all the 17 combined together. To be honest with you, this is not surprising. When you read the writings of the Bab in relation to Tahiri, the way she became one of the letters of the living, the controversies, because Tahiri was courageous, understood the station of the Bab, that is a new manifestation of God, and so and she was talking, a woman in those times in an Islamic world should not even have existence, let alone talking and debating learned ones. And anyway, so whatever she was doing was defying all traditional norms. And so even the prominent Babis, they still didn't know the exact station of the Bab. They understood him in terms of Islamic concepts. When they saw Tahiri in these ways, they were constantly writing letters to the Bab, complaining about Tahiri. But the answers that the Bab writes, these are even before going to Maku. It is after Maku that he very explicitly tells us about his station. Prior to that, he writes with the language of wisdom. In all of that, he is supporting Tahirih, and he's saying more or less that you won't be able to understand the session of Tahirih right now. In the future, you can understand, and so on. Anyway, so these are, and the last thing that in this relation I'll mention, this is one of the works of the Bab called Sahife Adliye, the Book of Justice. In Gate of the Heart, I have a chapter on this work of the Bab. This is one of the early writings of the Bab, so it is written in a language that Muslim readers would not be horrified about the total new creative rupture with traditional ideas. And the discussion is about the concept of the pillars of the faith, namely fundamental principles of Shia Islam. And so he talks about, the whole book is about that, and he talks about that in detail, which is not an issue that we want to talk about it. But then he ends that he ends his discussion of the pillars of the faith with this statement. I'll read it in its original Persian, and I'll say what it means. وَسَلُوك کن با نساء خود به احسن سبیل محبت که نساء مؤمنه اوراق شجره کافورند در جنت و میازار ایشان را به طرف عینی که به قدر همین طرف محجوب از حکم الله خواهی بود. It is very strange that in a work which is a description of the pillars of the faith, which is the issues of the unity of God, the station of the prophets, things like that. It's all these metaphysical ideas. He ends that discussion with affirmation of the necessity of dealing with women in the utmost manner of love, and that never to become a source of grief and sadness for them. The fact that the writings of the Bab, out of nothing, attaches this concept to the discourse on the pillars of the faith, says something unique about the Bab. And of course, the fact of Tahirih, Badasht, and the fact that rejection of patriarchy became the symbol of the emergence of a new religion, a new revelation, the unity of these two, even in this early work, you can see that. I probably talked much more than what I was expected, but you can see that there are so much that I'm controlling myself not to say too much. But whatever I mentioned, I think for anyone who has a sense of decency, love, fairness, can see the beautiful character of the Bab, aside from being a prophet of God, as an exceptional, beautiful being.
Dr. Saiedi, words fail me to thank you. Such special aspects of his writings and his character. Thank you so very much. We would like to open the floor for Q&A. Dr. Saiedi, would you prefer us to actually record the Q&A, or would you want me to stop here?
Since you have talked for such a long time, I mean, I talked for such a long time, I think we should have questions or comments. It doesn't have to be questions, can be comments as well, but for just 10, 15 minutes at the most.
Sure, okay. Nastaran Khanum, go ahead, please.
Allahu Akbar. I prefer to talk when you stop the record. Thank you.
You don't want to be recorded?
Yes.
According to the Bab, everything consists of two aspects, existence and essence, or divinity and servitude. In the writings of the Bab, anything which comes into existence has to go through 7 stages of creation. And these 7 stages of creations are 3 and 4. The 3 are the conditions of the possibility of anything to be, and the next 4 are the actualization and realization of that in the world. The first 3 are will, mashiyat, irade, qadar. Will, irade, which I have translated that as determination, and qadar. Qadar usually is defined as predestination, but I have translated it as destiny. So the first 3 stages of creation correspond to the will or mashiyat, becomes existence of things, the divinity of the things. Irade or determination becomes the essence of things. As I mentioned, everything for to be has these 2 elements. And qadar or destiny becomes the unification, coming together of existence and essence. So you can have existence and you can have essence, but if they are not coming together, there is no being. So for everything to be, there is at least 3 elements: existence, essence, and the coming together, addition, joining of these together. This fact is metaphorically always presented in the writings of the Bab as heaven, namely existence, the divine will, and earth, which is the essence, the servitude of things, and whatever lies in between, which is qadar, which is the coming together of them and unification of them. And of course, this symbolism becomes the basis of hundreds of other things. So varieties of things are understood in terms of this concept.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Great.
Saiedi. Thank you.
You have 3 hands that I can see briefly.
Yeah, Mary, and by the way, Empire is here from Congo. I had never seen his face, but today he opened his camera. Welcome, Empire. Go ahead, Mary Rose.
My question is pretty short. You mentioned that there is information in the letters that the Bab wrote to his wife, his mother, his father, and so on, that is not part of the historical records. And, it sounds amazing, and I don't really know what that means. Does that mean they're not translated? Does that mean they're somewhere else?
Well, what it means is that the Bab needs to be studied. And so far, the world of humanity, including the Baha'is, have not really studied the Bab. It's not just his letters. All his writings, so many of his writings are referred to, and they have segments which gives information about the history of the life of the Bab. His own writings give a lot of information. But they are not known because the writings of the Bab, except very few of them, have not been studied. And that's, in a sense, tragic, but in a sense, extremely exciting. Namely, that the Baha'i community knows that the writings of the Bab are part of the Baha'i faith. His laws, of course, are abrogated, but his philosophical worldview, his spiritual worldview is part of the Baha'i faith, foundation of the Baha'i faith. And yet there is so much that we don't know. So future is pregnant with all these possibilities and spiritual development.
Thank you. I want to tell you how much Oakville loves you. We spent 2 years, I'm a member of a study group studying logos and civilization. And after the summer off, now we've started Gate of the Heart. So, thank you. But I would love to see another book from you, or even a long article about everything is sacred. It's such a topical and important statement.
In the Gate
And-
of the Heart that you are going to study, there is a lot of that. In that
Okay.
book, you will find a lot of things.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
But thank you
Well,
very
I'll-
much. You are very kind.
I'll think of something else. Don't worry.
Thank you, Mary Rose. Mary Rose is a neighbor. Love you. Empire, empire, empire. Unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. I have two questions. I don't know if it is one or two. And here we used to say that the writings of the Bab are very hard to understand. And yeah, we used to read selections from the writing of the Bab. And many of the writings are very, very hard to understand. So I would like to know some techniques to go through them, some suggestion that we can be using to really understand their meaning. And also, like, for example, like here you say that he said Tahiri, all the truth of the letters of the living was reflected in Tahiri. For someone's for my understanding is like, even though we are saying women are equal to men, but there is like superiority. Is like Tahiri was spiritually superior to the to the letters of the living, because 17 was one. So yeah, I would like to understand, because there is not yeah, English is very hard. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, you're right. The writings of the Bab are difficult, and that is one of the reasons that has not been much studied, but in the future we'll have. My book, Gate of the Heart, which was mentioned, is all about the writings of the Bab. So if you find that book, that can help a little, and there are others also have written about the Bab, writings of the Bab can help. But ultimately is reading the writings of the Bab and understanding the writings of the Bab through the writings of the Bab. So the more you read about of his own writings, the more you can begin to understand different parts. So at first, a part of his writings we read might not be very easily understandable, but when we read more and more, together that comes back and clarifies that other part. About the session of Tahiri that you mentioned, that's my impression as well, what you are saying. But I just mentioned what the Bab has said. But for me also, it means that the session of Tahiri is unique. No one in the dispensation of the Bab comes close to Tahiri. Tahiri has a session separate from everybody else outside of each category. But aside from that, when we are in the normal realm, Qudus is supposed to be extremely important. But these are, personal understanding of these things, and people can understand these things differently. But that fact of the writings of the Bab is not known anywhere, because that work of the Bab is not read by the people, so that they do. So for that reason, I share that in order to give a sense of who the Bab is. I mean, this young man in an Islamic world, in a very extremely traditionalistic world, and he thinks like that about women. It's just unbelievable.
Thank you. Thank you. Empire, are you happy with us? Smile.
Yeah.
Thank you. آقای متین.
Allah, our beloveds of the Bab around the world. Before everything else, I will apologize. I have two devices because I have a problem with my camera. If you don't see me, excuse me for that. And I hope you're hearing me very well. I'm using two devices. Allah, I hope you remember me, Mujan, in 1972.
You are the Mujan, my friend, huh? We were neighbors. You're that Mujan.
This is Mujan, your student in the years 1972 back in Tehran.
Your brother was Jubin or something like that, right? Or no?
He's my brother.
Anyway,
Yeah,
I'm very happy to see you.
Same thing, dear Nader. I go to the main subject. I have a curiosity about the communication between Bab and Baha'u'lláh about Baha'u'llah's first declaration in Siyah-Chal. Baha'u'lláh didn't publish his first declaration in Siyah-Chal. I understood that Bab asked him not to publish. Would you please talk about this issue more, please?
As you said, the relation, I mean, in a sense, Bab and Baha'u'lláh are one and the same reality. It's the same reality which is reflected in two different mirrors, but it's the same image, it's the same reality. That's the reality of the Bab. The reality of the Bab is one and the same, but reflected in two different form of glasses, which becomes the personal, physical station of the Bab and Baha'u'lláh. So, I mean, they are one, and so there is no need for any communication, external communication. They are one. But the Bab was to make the world ready for the revelation of Baha'u'lláh. And of course, one of the ways was by creating and sharing this new worldview in his writings, which some of them I shared with you. Through that also, he paved the way for the coming of Baha'u'lláh. It was these philosophical ideas which prepared humanity for ideas like oneness of humankind, like universal peace, and everything else. They were so revolutionary in terms of the history of religion that it needed a foundation to become, people become ready for the teachings of Baha'u'lláh. So, of course, the conceived declaration of Baha'u'lláh in the year 9, namely 9 years, 8-9 years after declaration of the Bab, takes place after martyrdom of the Bab. But you are right that this is something that is mentioned in varieties of ways in the writings of the Bab. The writings of the Bab in the for instance, Arabic Bayan, which I just had it and showed you one statement about whale. Like many of his other writings, talks about the year 9, when people would attain all good, kull khair, which in the language of the Bab means revelation of God and manifestation of God, which is the ultimate good for humanity. And in a letter that he wrote addressing one of the letters of the living, also Yahya, Darabi, Wahid, they both asked the same question about he whom God shall make manifest. The Bab sent it to both of them, but it is written addressing the letter of the living Mullah Baqir. And in that letter, you have in symbolic ways very clear statements which shows the name of Baha'u'lláh, which is Hussein, and also the year of his revelation. And the Bab, what it says is that in the year 8, you would attain the presence of him whom God shall make manifest. if not at the beginning of the year 8, at the end of the year 8. And exactly the time of the concealed revelation of the Bab was exactly at the end of the year 8 and the beginning of the year 9. So that was shared with the Babis, but of course in not so explicit fashion, but in a way that those who wanted could understand. But already the concealed revelation of the Bab is discussed, of Baha'u'lláh is discussed and predicted in his various writings.
Thank you, dear. Just makes me clarify again, excuse me, extension of this. For my simple understanding is, so Baha'u'lláh, Bab asked Baha'u'lláh not to declare. Is it all right? Is it okay to understand like this? Did Bab ask Baha'u'lláh stop publishing your declaration? Is it correct?
Well, the Bab did not want the real station of Baha'u'lláh to become known and public, because, of course, if that was the case, then Baha'u'lláh would have been martyred, like the Bab himself. So it was the wish of the Bab that Baha'u'lláh, in reality, particularly after the Bab, would act as the actual leader of the Babi community, but would not be known formally as the leader of the Babi community, nor to be formally known as he whom God shall make manifest, until after Baha'u'lláh has made the situation ready, and ultimately in the year 1863, then Baha'u'lláh makes public his realization.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Forzande John, if you allow, we finish.
2 minutes. I know, I apologize. 2 minutes. 1 minute for a question that Pina asked, and 1 minute for my poor self. I have a question. I'll first, as a Baha'i, read for you Pina's question. Is the mother book, the Bayan, which is mentioned in the tablet of Ahmad, this is the most holy book of the Babis, while the most holy book in the Baha'i faith is Kitab Aqdas?
Well, in the writings of the Bab, the word Bayan has different meanings. One meaning is any writing of the Bab. So all the writings of the Bab are called Bayan, all of them, without exception. And the word Bayan is one of the names of God as well. And so he says in his writings that you can call it Bayan or Bayan, because ultimately it is one of the names of God. And it has so many symbolic meanings, it's not time to discuss that. But specifically, two of the writings of the Bab are called Persian Bayan and Arabic Bayan. And these two are the most important writings of the Bab, particularly the Persian one, because the Persian one elaborates and explains in detail the issues which are discussed briefly in the Arabic Bayan. Arabic Bayan is short, like 30 pages, 40 pages. The Persian Bayan is about 300 pages, in which he explains the worldview and the laws of the new revelation. And so because of that, it is not only the ultimate expression of the philosophy, theology, worldview of the Bab, but also his teachings, and so is unique in his writings. And Kitab Aqdas in the Baha'i Faith plays more or less the same station.
My last question to you, this is my question. Can you just, for a short period of time, just talk about the Bab's relationship with his uncle, Haji Mirza Said Ali, and in such a way that he actually got martyred in Tehran, whereas some other uncles at the time did not become Babis. So can you just for 2 seconds, please?
Well, I mean, he's very close to his uncles, to all of them. But Sayyid Ali has a unique, they have a unique relation. Like he recognized the station. He's the first one after the letters of the living who recognized the Bab. So he would be the number 19 who recognized the Bab. But his other uncles, they did not formally become Babis in the sense of accepting the Bab as a new manifestation of God, but they all loved him and adored him and believed that he is a saintly figure, very spiritual, all of them. And one of the most interesting writings of the Bab is a particular letter that he writes to his oldest uncle. Sayyid Ali is not the oldest, although we call him Khale Azam, but in reality, age-wise is not. Age-wise, his uncle Muhammad was the eldest one. And in this letter, the Bab starts by saying that since every morning I used to see you, that in prayer you say to God oh God, I believe in the secret, in the hidden secret, in the mystery of the family of Prophet Muhammad. The Bab says that now I want to explain to you so that your statement would not be just verbal, but would be real, namely you really believe in the mystery, in the hidden secret, in the truth of the family of Prophet Muhammad. And then he explains that the secret is the divinity of the manifestations of God, and that this divinity now has appeared in the form of the Bab. And he explains that that's why he wrote commentary on the Surah of Joseph as his declaration, because Joseph and Qayyum are one and the same. Qayyum as the self-subsisting name of God. As Qayyum means the one who exists, but whose existence is out of itself, gives existence to others. So the letters of the living become living through the Bab. But the Bab has existence through himself. And it's one of the most interesting, most complex discussions that the Bab has. So he was very close to all of them. But as you said, yes, the relation with that other uncle was exceptional.
Thank you, Dr. Saiedi. I won't get the other question. I apologize, friends. We just have a time for one prayer, which I would like to ask Empire to get ready to say a prayer. And Dr. Saiedi, our absolute love and devotion to Bita Khanum. Thank you for coming tonight, although you had previous engagements. We love you. Thank you
very
so
much.
much. Thank you. Thank you.
Bita is also here. She hears everything.
Thank you. Bita Jan. Allahu Akbar. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Empire.
you, Dr. Saiedi.
What did you say, Mary Rose?
I said thank you, Dr. Saiedi.
Thank you.
You're most welcome. And thank you for allowing me to be part of this meeting.
Empire, are you going to say a prayer?
Yes.
Okay, then. Friends, after this prayer, we will close the meeting. Thank you. Go ahead.
Please.
Ee Mungu changamsha na furahisha roho yangu, takasa moyo wangu, ngariza fikira zangu, naacha mashaka yangu yote mikononi mwako Bwana. Ewe kiongozi changu na kimbilio langu, sitalemewa wala kuzunika tena, nitafurahiwa na kuchangamuka. E Mungu, sitahangaika tena, wala sitaacha taabu kunisumbua. Sitaishi kwa vitu visivyofaa maishani. Ewe Maulana, wewe ni mwenye huruma kwangu zaidi ya mimi nilivyo mwenyewe, najitoa mwenyewe kwako Bwana, zaidi ya mimi nilivyo mwenyewe, najitoa mwenyewe kwako Bwana.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
Dr.
thank you. Oh
Thank
my
you. Thank you.
Dr. Saidi, we have someone else. Tara is here and would like to say a prayer. We don't want to keep you waiting here. We appreciate the fact that you accepted to be with us tonight. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We go for another prayer by an angel who just came here just in time for us to say this prayer. So if you need to leave, we understand that.
Yes, I leave after the prayer. So, but I say goodbye to everybody
Goodbye.
right after the prayer.
تارا جان مرسی که اومدی عزیزم.
Firuz John, we need Nader come more often because I have few questions. I didn't want to take the time. He's coming the next time? Next week?
Absolutely. Yes, yes. Tara John, go for it.
به نام گوینده توانا، ای پسر خوش ساحتی است، ساحت هستی. اگر اندر آیی و نیکو بساطی است، بساط باقی. اگر از ملک فانی برتر خرامی، و نیکو بساطی است، بساط باقی اگر از ملک فانی برتر خرامی و ملیح است نشاط مستی اگر ساغر معانی از ید غلام الهی بیا شامی. اگر به این مراتب فائز شوی، از نیستی و فنا و محنت و خطا فارغ گردی.